As the 2024 general election is coming right around the corner, Democrats and Republicans are in a dead heat for the House of Representatives generic ballot. So in today's video, we will answer the question, who will win the House of Representatives in 2024? Now, as you may expect, not every single House district is created equal. Some districts are certainly more competitive. In this case, Democrats hold 183 safe or likely districts, while the Republican Party holds 201. In reality, only a little more than 4 dozen seats are actually going to decide House control in 2024. Now for some background information. Of course, Republicans right now narrowly control the House with 222 seats to the Democrats at 213. Now, obviously, 218 is the magic number needed to control the House of Representatives. Now, Republicans obviously have a fundamental advantage, as they only need 17 more seats to win the House, while Democrats need 35. But again, Democrats actually hold most of these toss-up seats right now, so we'll see who wins the House. We're going to start off geographically here in the state of Washington. Washington has one competitive district, Washington's 3rd district. Now, the state is definitely going to be very competitive in terms of this district in general. This was an unexpected Democratic flip where Joe Kent, the Republican, actually unseated the incumbent Republican in the open primary, Marie Gutschkamp-Perez, and he ended up losing in a surprising defeat. However, in the open primaries this year, which essentially is a two-party primary where both Democrats and Republicans could participate, what we see is that the combined Democratic vote from Marie Gutschkamp-Perez was significantly lower than the combined Republican vote. The combined Republican vote is 51.5%, while the combined Democratic vote is just under 46%. In other words, Democrats need to get a lot of this Republican vote who voted for Leslie Laughlin. Will some of these voters vote for Gutschkamp-Perez? Probably. Will it be enough? Probably not. At this point here, I would say that the Republicans are slightly favored to flip this district by a tilt margin. This will be one of the very important districts just because of the fact that this is held by a Democratic incumbent. Democrats want to minimize their losses for them to not lose the House. If they're losing districts, that's a really bad sign. Now for the state of Oregon. Oregon has two competitive districts, the Oregon 6th District and Driasalias. This was actually a district that voted for Joe Biden by like 10 points. I'm not sure why this was super competitive, partially because it was an open seat, it was a newly drawn seat where there was no Democratic incumbent. Nevertheless, here, this district should not have been this competitive for the Democratic Party. Democrats should have won it by a more comfortable margin. Now that they have an incumbent, I think that this will probably be less competitive, maybe about Democrat for plus 4 to 5, which would be sufficient for a lean margin, but not necessarily a likely characterization. Now going to Oregon's neighboring district here, which is currently held by incumbent Lori Chavez de Raymer. Now this was also a pretty surprising district. This was a Biden plus 10 district, and this ended up going to the Republicans, partially because the Democrat Jamie McClade Skinner actually unseated the Democratic incumbent in the Democratic primaries there. Jamie McClade Skinner was someone who was more progressive, while the incumbent Kurt Schrader was someone who was more moderate. Now, this was a surprise. I do not expect Lori Chavez de Raymer to hold on, just because she's not that popular. And the fact is, this is a presidential election year, so I'm going to put it right now in the tilt Democratic column. One flip for Republicans, one flip for Democrats. Now, moving on here to the state of California. Many have made the argument that House control solely rests on this state because of the fact that there is an abundance of these competitive districts that Democrats could end up picking up. I'm going to start off here with the Los Angeles area-based districts here. This district right here held by incumbent Republican Ken Calvert. This is a district that was won by Donald Trump. I do not expect this district to go for the Democratic Party just because, again, Joe Biden won the state by 30. He still lost the district. It's unlikely that a Democrat such as Kamala Harris will be able to win the statewide vote by more than 30. I think she'll probably win by less. This is a safe, likely Republican district. This district would be safe. I'm not sure why it's not characterized. This district right here is Katie Porter's home district. It voted for Porter by 4. The problem here for Democrats is the fact that she is retiring because of the fact that she ran for the Democratic open Senate seat that was vacated by Dianne Feinstein. She lost that race, but now she's essentially unemployed. And what happens here is that this district It's now an open seat, which means Republicans have a better chance of flipping it. Still, because it's based in Los Angeles, because it's based in the blue trending part of Los Angeles, as well as some of Orange County, I'm just going to put it right now in the Tilt Democratic District for good measure. This district over here is held by Republican Michelle Steele. It's about a Biden plus 4 seat, but I honestly don't think Kamala Harris will carry it by more than 2% at this point in time because Michelle Steele is the incumbent. This is a lean Republican seat. Now, this district right here, I believe held by Democrat Jim Costa, not really that competitive. It's going to be likely Democrat. I'm not sure why that's not characterized yet. This district as well, I believe that is also not a district that is super competitive. It went for Josh Harder, the incumbent Democrat, there by 10%, so that's going to be likely blue. Now, the action here will likely be in these 3 seats. All 3 seats voted for Joe Biden here by double digits. These are held by 3 Republican incumbents, John DeRate, David Valadao, and Mike Garcia. These are 3 politicians with pretty dramatically different personas and political beliefs, but they were Republicans who were able to win in 2022 despite the fact that they were Biden plus 10 or more districts. I'm going to start off here with the 13th district, which arguably has the most vulnerable Republican incumbent. This was a pretty surprising win for the Republican Party, considering the fact that this was a district that voted for Biden by 10, and the fact that, again, there was nothing special about John DeRate that would have made him more competitive here. Personally, I think that he won because of low turnout, and I think although this is a rematch, and rematches generally don't go well for the challenger, I do certainly believe at this point that the Democrats are probably nearly favored to win here. However, the 2 districts over here in California, there are open primary systems. First off, in the 22nd district, David Valadao, a pro-impeachment Republican, who defeated Rudy Salas back in 2022 by about 5%. He won essentially the open primary here in the Republican combined vote against the Democratic combined vote. Valadao won by almost 10, so I do believe that this is a lean Republican seat. Similarly, Mike Garcia's district, I'm also giving it lean Republican. Mike Garcia, the Republican incumbent, won this district with 55% of the vote in the open primary, with the Democrats combining at 45%. Now, I do understand that this is maybe not the best characterization because there were some Democrats who probably didn't vote because they weren't sure which Democrat they were going to support. But at the end of the day, I still believe that Mike Garcia, someone who's very well liked in his home district, probably lead Republican. Now going to the next state here, the state of Nevada with 3 competitive districts, Nevada's 4th with Stephen Horsford, Nevada's 1st with Dina Titus, and Nevada's 3rd with Susie Lee. Now this was a Democratic dummy matter, which means that Democrats manipulated the map to their advantage, but all of their seats are essentially very competitive, and in a very good year for the Republican Party, they could theoretically pick up all 4 seats. However, 2022 was the first year in like 4 decades where Republicans actually got the majority in the House vote, and even then they weren't actually able to pick up any of these seats, and they weren't really that close in any districts. So at this point, because of the fact that this was supposed to be a Democratic gerrymander, I'm just going to put all 3 districts in the lean blue column. Now going to Arizona with 2 very competitive districts. First off, in this district right here, where there's going to be a rematch between Juan Cicilline, the Republican, and Christine Engle, the Democrat. This was a very competitive district, but again, with now the incumbency in the Republicans' favor, and the fact that Republicans are doing pretty well in Arizona polling-wise in terms of the presidential election results, I do believe that Juan Cicilline is probably favored, especially considering he's a more moderate Republican. Now, this district over here with an incumbent's name that I'm not going to even try and pronounce because I always pronounce it wrong, like David Schorweiker or something. Anyways, this is a district that Joe Biden won by roughly 2%, and it's a fast-trending blue district. It is a district I do believe will end up flipping to the Democratic Party just because of the fact that this is a hugely trending blue region, and David Schorweiker, he only won by 0.8% in a relatively decent environment for the Republican Party. Turnout was very high in this district as well, over 360,000 votes. This will be very competitive for sure. I do still give the Democrats a narrow edge. Now, in the state of Alaska, Mary Pelota, she was able to win more than 50% of the vote in the open primaries there, facing 11 challengers. I do believe this is a lean blue seat. Now going to Colorado here, there are 2 competitive districts, Barbara Kirkmeyer's district over here, and also the district held currently by Lauren Boebert. Now there's going to be a switch of hands with Boebert now running in this district. Now, this is a district that is based around Denver in the more, suburban regions of Denver, and this is a trending blue district, so I'm going to put it in lean blue. While this district here, which was vacated by Lauren Boebert, it was the closest House district out of all the House districts back in 2022, with Lauren Boebert winning by just 0.16% over Democrat Adam Frisch. Adam Frisch is trying again. The problem here for him is that he's not facing Lauren Boebert, someone who was extremely unpopular in her home district. He's facing a more popular Republican, and he's not going to win this district, though it could still be competitive. Now going to the state of New Mexico. New Mexico is currently, there's a Democratic incumbent, Gabe Vasquez, who won against a Republican incumbent by just under 1% back in 2022. I do believe that this is a district that will go blue just because of the fact that Democrats have the incumbency factor, despite the fact that some parts of this district is trending towards the Republicans. So this is a district I'm going to put it in the tilt blue column. Moving on here to the state of Texas, where there's essentially two competitive districts. First off, this district right here held by incumbent Democrat Henry Cuellar, who actually got indicted over a bribery scheme. Now, he has of course maintained his innocence, and there has not been a trial yet. That being said, he remains heavily popular in his home district, and he's also a conservative Democrat, the last Democrat in the House of Representatives to be against abortion. He's very popular. For example, I'm just going to take a random example here. Webb County, this was a county that only voted for Joe Biden with 61% of the vote. He was able to carry 72% of the vote in that county, these heavily trending Republican counties in the state. In fact, if you just look at the 2020 comparison, Cuellar did about 7%, almost 7% better than Joe Biden did in the district. So he's someone who's very popular. There's a lot of uncertainty there, but it does look like that if he does get, he does not get convicted, he'll probably end up winning that district. Now, this district right here, based in Hidalgo, is of course trending towards the Republican Party, and the incumbent there did not do too well. Although again, this was a two-incumbent race. Essentially, I do expect the Democratic Party though to still maintain this district by a likely margin. Now, a lot of these states down here in the South, they're not really that, competitive. They don't have a lot of these competitive House districts. Some of these states have redistricted. For example, Louisiana used to have one Democratic representative. Now they have two. Going to the state of Alabama, again, now they have two districts that are likely going to be won by Democrats. North Carolina also had a redistricting. It looks like that they produced a map that is much more resembling of a Republican gerrymander. In the one district that is more competitive, it is also a district that was very competitive back in 2022 in the presidential level. Don Davis, the Democratic incumbent here in this district, underran Joe Biden by roughly 2%. Biden won this district by about 1. This will be very competitive, but because some of the rural black districts around the state of North Carolina have been trending essentially red, as well as some of the other rural black districts all across the nation, right now I'm just going to put it in the tilt Republican column. So far, we've seen not many flips. I believe 2 flips for the Republicans, 2 flips for the Democrats. Now going to Nebraska's 2nd district. This is a district that also possesses 1 electoral college vote. Right now, it does look like that Kamala Harris is favored to win that electoral college vote, but I do believe that Don Bacon, the incumbent representative from the state of Nebraska, will end up hanging on. Don Bacon is someone who is relatively popular. Despite the fact that Joe Biden won the district by almost 7, he was able to hang on by around 2% back in 2022. However, it is noticeable that this district has become increasingly more competitive in a house-wide level. Usually, Don Bacon would win by a pretty substantial margin back in 2022, despite the fact that the environment was not that favorable for the Democratic Party. He only won by a 2% margin. Nevertheless, here I believe he is sufficiently popular to hang on to his seat. Now going to this district in Iowa, this is a district that voted for Trump, now has a Republican incumbent. Not surprising, it is a lean red seat. Going to Illinois here, this again is a heavily Democratic gerrymandered state. We only have 3 Republican districts here, and an entire 14 districts in favor of the Democrats. You can look at the Illinois map. It's extremely weird. Just take this district that was previously held by Adam Kinzinger, a Republican who now kind of acts like a Democrat. It kind of runs here from close to the Missouri border here in St. Louis City, and runs in Springfield and then goes in Champaign, essentially the heavily Democratic areas of the state, where Democrats are essentially doing all they can to win the districts in Illinois. Now, this district, again, it's gerrymandered. It's a district that will favor Democrats. I have it as lean blue. Now going to the state of Minnesota, Angie Craig's district. She is the incumbent. She's probably going to end up hanging on just because of the fact that, incumbents generally win, and this is a district that is trending blue. Now going to the state of Wisconsin. Wisconsin, there is one competitive district. If this district goes red, it goes blue, it would be a very bad sign for Trump on election day. But I do expect this district to go red. This was previously Ron Kind's district, a former congressman who was more working class, was able to win this district by like 15 points, despite the fact that Trump carried the district in 2016. However, he has since retired, and now this district generally goes to the Republican Party. Now going to the state of the state of Michigan here. Michigan has 3 competitive districts. Dan Kidley, he's someone who is a historic overperformer. He overperformed Joe Biden in this district by 8. He should have no problem in winning re-election. I do believe that someone like Kamala Harris may actually lose this district, but he is a historic overperformer. This is a likely blue district. Now, the district down here, held by Elisa Slotkin, she is running for Senate, so I do believe this will be more competitive, but I'm still going to place it right now in the teal blue column, just because of the fact that this is actually more of a bluer district than Dan Kidley's district up here. Now going to this district right over here in Macomb County, incumbent Republican John James, who ran for Senate back in 2022, narrowly lost to Democrat Gary Peters. This is, of course, a very competitive seat, but I do expect right now John James to narrowly carry it, just because of the fact that Republicans have done quite well in this district, and essentially, this was a district that was carried by Trump back in 2016 and 2020, so I expect John James to end up hanging on there by about a lean margin. Now going to the state of Ohio, in this district right here, which is essentially a district that was previously heavily blue, now being more competitive, the incumbent Democrat there, Marcy Kaptur, defeated the Republican J.R. Majewski by a really big margin. This was a district that voted for Trump, that voted for Marcy Kaptur by 14. I do not believe that Kaptur will end up losing because of her strong performance, lean blue in that district. Now the district over here in Akron, this was a district that voted for Biden by roughly 4. There is a Democratic incumbent. I do believe she'll end up holding on by a pretty slim margin, because I do expect Kamala Harris to actually lose a district in 2024, but I expect a Democratic incumbent to be able to hang on. Now, district over here, which is a district that is based in Gary, heavily trending Republican, but nevertheless, a Democrat is expected to carry this district. Next up, going to the state of Virginia with 2 competitive races. First off, the district here in Virginia Beach. The incumbent here is a Republican who unseated a Democratic incumbent, Aline Luria, back in 2022, Jen Kiggins. Kiggins won by roughly 4% in a district that voted for Biden by roughly around 3. Now, this will certainly be a very hotly contested district, because it does illustrate the question of whether Democrats will be able to do well in some of these more suburban/urban districts, and Republicans would love to be able to retain this seat. At this point, considering there's a Republican incumbent, and the fact that Virginia polling in 2024 is much tighter than it was back in 2020, with Kamala Harris and Donald Trump in some instances neck and neck, I would expect this district to be lean Republican. Now, the district right here, previously held by Abigail Spanberger, who is going to try and run for governor in 2025. This is a more competitive district. This was a district that voted for Biden by roughly about 6 back in 2020, however, without any type of Democratic incumbent, plus the fact that polling in this district has been really close in terms of the fact that in terms of the fact that Kamala Harris is just significantly underrunning Joe Biden in the state of Virginia. This will be an interesting narrative to watch, but at the end of the day, I'm just going to give it right now to the Democratic Party here by a tilt margin. Now going to the state of Pennsylvania. The district over here, previously held by Democrat Connor Lamb, now held by someone else. I forgot their name. Right, Chris DeLuzio. It was a district that voted for Biden by roughly 5. The Democrat here actually overran Joe Biden. I do not expect at all for the Republican Party to end up winning this district because of the fact that it is more suburban. Now, right next to it is Butler County, where Trump had his attempted assassination attempt. Nevertheless, here, I would say lean right now for the Democratic Party. Now, a district over here based in Harrisburg, Scott Perry, someone who's pretty conservative, who also generally outruns President Trump's number back in 2020. I expect that he will probably win re-election here by a likely margin. Now, there's two competitive districts here in the working class part of Pennsylvania. There's Matt Cartwright and there's also Susan Wild. Both of them won re-election back in 2022 by roughly about 2% each. Now, I think that Matt Cartwright will probably lose because Kamala Harris is not super good with these working class voters. She's probably going to underperform with that group of constituencies, and she'll probably end up costing Matt Cartwright his seat. After all, this was a seat that Joe Biden also lost in the presidential election results back in 2020, and Kamala Harris is worse with working class voters than Joe Biden by a pretty substantial margin. Now, this district right here, this could be very interesting. It encompasses a very kind of moderate part of the state. We have Lehigh County, a swing county, and we have Northampton County, another pretty competitive county, and we have a little bit of the rurals. Lehigh County is the bluest of the counties, and then the rural parts are the more competitive ones. Whoever wins Northampton probably ends up winning the district. Northampton will also be very crucial for the statewide overall election results. So right now, the district is definitely very much 50-50. I'd say it's one of the most competitive districts on this map. Nevertheless, here, I would right now give it to the Democratic incumbent just because she is relatively popular, and I do believe that she did all right back in 2022. She overran Joe Biden by roughly 1.4%, which is, I guess, okay for a Democrat who was in a relatively rough environment back in 2022. Now, going to the sole competitive district in the state of New Jersey, it's currently held by Tom Kean Jr. However, this was a district that voted for Democrats by roughly 5 back in 2020, despite the fact that it voted for the Republican candidate by roughly 2% over the Democratic incumbent Tom Malinowski. Now, of course, this is a relatively competitive district. However, I do expect the fact that given how poorly Democrats have been polling in the state of New Jersey, that this district would end up going Republican by a lean margin, which puts the Republicans in a position to retain control of the United States House. Now going up here to New England, where Republicans see 3 potential pickup opportunities. Now, first off, in this district over here, held by Democrat Ann Cluster. She was someone who was able to consistently overrun Joe Biden and his margin, and the fact is this is a relatively blue district. This was a state that voted for Biden by 7, and this district voted to the left of the state, so right now I'm still going to give it to Ann Cluster here by a likely margin. Now, Jared Golden, however, could be in some trouble in a presidential year because Joe Biden essentially lost the district to Donald Trump by roughly 7, and split ticket voting is quite rare. Additionally, you have to consider the fact that essentially someone like Kamala Harris is not doing super well with these white working class voters, and she might lose the district by 10 if not more. That could make it much more difficult for Jared Golden to end up winning re-election, but it's still a very competitive district. Right now, though, I still have Jared Golden losing. As for this district, it voted for Joe Biden by roughly 6, held by incumbent Democrat Chris Pappas. I expect him to win re-election. Now, some people think that the control of the state of New York, and by extension the House of Representatives, will ultimately come down to the state of New York. Now, what we saw in 2022 was essentially a Republican blowout in the United States House of Representatives, thanks to the fact that Republican Lee Zeldin essentially overrun Donald Trump's margin in the state of New York by roughly 17%. That was a very significant overperformance for the Republicans. As a result, it translated to really big Republican overperformances across the state. For example, you can look at Long Island, right? For example, Andrew Garabino, a Republican from Long Island, did 20% better than Donald Trump in 2022. You can look at someone like George Santos, who has now been expelled. He did 16% better than Donald Trump did in the district back in 2022, despite being repeatedly considered a quote-unquote weak candidate. You can look at even, for example, in the Rochester district, Joe Morelli, not supposed to be in a competitive district. This district trend to the Republicans by 12. You can look at all of these examples, and you can see instances of Republicans overperforming thanks to Lee Zeldin. However, Lee Zeldin this time is not on the ballot Instead, it's going to be Donald Trump who's on the ballot, which could mess up some things for the Republican Party, who could be in jeopardy in some of these districts like New York 3rd, which is already held by a Democrat. Thomas Suozzi probably going to win. This was a district that voted for Biden by like 10%. Although George Santos was able to win it, it was kind of because of the fact of 2022, and in 2024, it's going to be hard for the Republicans to end up actually flipping this district back. Now, this district could be very interesting. It's a district that again voted for Joe Biden by roughly 10%, if not actually a bit more than that. Again, this voted for Joe Biden by 14% in a presidential year. Unless you're able to really distinguish yourself from the National Republican GOP, it's going to be really hard for the Republicans to win re-election. At this point, I'm going to have to give this district right now to the Republican Party by a tilt margin, just because, again, this was a Biden plus 14 seat. I think, of course, the Republican will significantly outrun Joe Biden's numbers, Donald Trump's numbers in the district, but I don't believe it would be enough. Now going to upstate New York, where there's a very interesting dynamic. Essentially, 3 of the 4 districts in upstate New York are currently held by Republican incumbents, despite the fact that Biden won all of these districts by at least 5%, if not in one case, right here for Mike Dollar's district, he actually voted for Joe Biden by double digits, so it's a very interesting phenomenon. Now, I'm just going to give Pat Ryan his seat just because of the fact that there is a Democratic incumbent in this district, and it voted for Joe Biden by 7. It's going to be really hard for the Republicans to flip that. We go to this district right here held by Republican Mike Lawler. This was a shock when Democrat Sean Patrick Maloney, the head and the chair of the DCCC, traditionally a very powerful organization in Democratic politics. He was the chair and he ended up losing that district. It was very interesting. It was kind of because of the fact that he was not from this district, but he wanted to win his re-election in a relatively bluer region, and as a result, he just decided to run in this district. However, it does look unlikely that Mike Lawler is going to win in a district that Joe Biden won by double digits. I'm going to have to give it right now to the Republicans, to the Democrats here by a tilt margin. Now, there's 2 more districts here. Brandon Williams, another vulnerable Republican incumbent. This was roughly about a Joe Biden plus 6.5% district. And the fact is, he also won by a very narrow margin back in 2022 by less than 1%. I just do not believe that someone like Brandon Williams will be able to win re-election because he's also not particularly popular in that district. Not saying he's particularly unpopular, but not saying he's particularly popular either. However, the district right here in the more rural part of New York, it's a district that is trending Republican, plus the fact that Joe Biden only won the district by 4. I think it's feasible that the Republicans will probably be able to end up holding on to that district. Now, in conclusion, Republicans, in my opinion, are still favored to win the House, albeit by a pretty narrow margin. Currently, Republicans have 221 seats to Democrats, who have 214 after a bunch of special elections. Now, Republicans will have 220 and Democrats 215 in my most updated prediction. That being said, although this is a relatively slim margin, I'm pretty reluctant and pretty doubtful that Democrats are actually going to have a good chance of winning the House. That's because essentially, I don't see many pickup opportunities for the Democratic Party on this map. Maybe they have North Carolina's 1st district, maybe they have Nebraska's 2nd in their bag, but I believe that this will be a competitive race, but I think that Republicans are still fundamentally favored just because of the fact that Democrats need to win a large majority of the competitive districts in order to have a very slim majority, or Republicans need about 1/3 of the competitive districts in order to win their House majority. Anyways, thank you for watching today's video. Be sure to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day. Goodbye.